I was working at a hardware store in Germany when an American guy asked for a 2x4. I showed him the lumber section. He looked confused. He said, "These are all the wrong size." I asked what he needed. He said, "A 2x4. 2 inches by 4 inches." I explained we use centimeters here. He stared at the wood like it personally betrayed him. He said, "Can you just convert it?" I said, "It's already converted. This is the metric equivalent." He bought nothing and left muttering about international standards. My friend worked at a deli in Amsterdam. An American woman asked for half a pound of cheese. My friend asked, "Do you mean 200 grams?" The woman said, "No, half a pound." My friend explained they only use grams and kilograms. The woman got frustrated. She said, "Just give me half a pound. It's not that hard." My friend said, "I literally don't have a scale that measures pounds." The woman said, "What kind of deli doesn't measure in pounds?" My friend said, "A Dutch one." Another time, a guy at a gas station in France tried to put exactly 10 gallons in his rental car. The pump showed liters. He kept stopping and starting, trying to calculate in his head. He gave up at 38 liters and came inside asking if that was close to 10 gallons. The cashier said, "That's about 10 gallons, yes." He said, "Why don't you just use gallons?" The cashier said, "Why don't you just use liters?" The guy had no answer. I heard about an American couple in Sweden who got into an argument with their Airbnb host about the thermostat. They wanted it set to 72 degrees. The host kept setting it to 22 Celsius. The couple kept changing it back to 72. The host thought they were trying to cook themselves. He finally messaged them explaining that 72 Celsius is 162 Fahrenheit. They said, "We meant Fahrenheit." He said, "The thermostat only does Celsius." They left a review saying the heating system was broken. It was not broken. They just couldn't convert. A woman in Italy asked a pharmacist for Tylenol with 500 milligrams. The pharmacist showed her paracetamol. She said, "No, I need 500 milligrams." The pharmacist said, "This is 500 milligrams." She said, "But it doesn't say Tylenol." The pharmacist explained Tylenol is a brand name, and paracetamol is the medicine. She said, "I don't trust it if it's not Tylenol." The pharmacist said, "It's the exact same chemical." She walked out and tried 3 more pharmacies. Same answer every time. These stories happen every single day. Americans arrive in metric countries expecting feet, pounds, miles, and Fahrenheit. Then reality hits. Road signs show kilometers. Recipes use grams. Thermostats show Celsius. Weather reports are in different numbers. And instead of adapting, some people just fight it. They argue with locals. They leave bad reviews. They try to force inches into centimeter conversations. It never works. So let's talk about every way Americans struggle when the measurements don't match. Let's start with temperature, because this causes the most panic. Americans use Fahrenheit. Almost everyone else uses Celsius. And when Americans see numbers like 15 or 30, they have no idea if that's freezing or boiling. I worked at a hotel in Barcelona during summer. An American family checked in and immediately complained the air conditioning was broken. I checked the room. It was set to 21 Celsius. That's 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect temperature. I asked what was wrong. The dad said, "It's set to 21. That's freezing." I explained it's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. He said, "Why would anyone use Celsius?" I said, "Most of the world." He didn't believe me. He looked it up on his phone. His face fell. He said, "That's so confusing." I said, "Only if you don't learn it." Another guest in Prague called the front desk panicking because her room was 30 degrees. She thought she was burning alive. I explained 30 Celsius is 86 Fahrenheit. She said, "Why doesn't it just say 86? I said, "Because we're in Czech Republic." She said, "Don't you cater to tourists?" I said, "Not by changing our entire measurement system." A guy in Norway complained that the weather app was broken. He showed me his phone. It said -5 degrees. He said, "It can't be -5. I'm not frozen solid." I explained it's Celsius. -5 Celsius is 23 Fahrenheit. Cold, but not deadly. He said, "Who thought negative numbers for temperature was a good idea?" I said, "Scientists. It's based on water freezing at 0. He said, "Water freezes at 32. I said, "Only in Fahrenheit." He looked betrayed by science. My friend worked at a ski resort in Switzerland. An American woman asked what temperature the snow was. My friend said, "It's snow. It's 0 degrees or below." The woman said, "0? That's impossible. Water freezes at 32. My friend said, "In Celsius, water freezes at 0. The woman said, "That's too convenient." My friend said, "That's literally the point of Celsius." The woman didn't ski that day because she didn't trust the temperature. Someone in Finland asked a local why the sauna was set to 90 degrees. The local said, "That's normal sauna temperature." The American said, "90 degrees isn't even hot." The local stared at him. She said, "90 Celsius is 194 Fahrenheit. His eyes went wide. He said, "That's insane." She said, "That's sauna." He went in for 30 seconds and ran out sweating. He said saunas in America are way cooler. She said, "Because you probably set them to 90 Fahrenheit. A woman in Germany argued with a doctor about her fever. The doctor said her temperature was 38 degrees. She said, "That's way too low. I feel terrible." The doctor explained it's Celsius. 38 Celsius is 100.4 Fahrenheit. That's a fever. She said, "Why didn't you just say that?" The doctor said, "I did, in Celsius." She asked if they could redo the thermometer in Fahrenheit. They could not. Another guy in Denmark bought a thermometer to check the weather himself. He put it outside. It read 12 degrees. He posted online that Denmark was freezing in summer. People corrected him. He said, "12 degrees is cold." They said, "12 Celsius is 54 Fahrenheit. He deleted the post. Then he left a review saying the thermometer was mislabeled. It was not mislabeled. It was metric. I heard about a couple in Spain who refused to use the pool because the sign said the water was 25 degrees. They thought it was freezing. The lifeguard explained it's 77 Fahrenheit. They said, "Why didn't the sign say that?" He said, "Because we're in Spain." They asked if he could change the sign. He said no. They complained to the hotel. The hotel said, "We're not changing our signs for one guest." They never used the pool. Someone in Austria asked why the oven only went up to 250 degrees. She wanted to bake at 350. The oven was in Celsius. 250 Celsius is 482 Fahrenheit. Way hotter than she needed. She set it to 350 anyway. Her cookies turned into charcoal in 4 minutes. She blamed the oven. The host blamed her refusal to convert. A guy in Poland thought the thermostat was broken because it only went up to 30. He wanted to set it to 72. The host explained 30 Celsius is 86 Fahrenheit. He said, "So I can't make it warmer than 86? The host said, "You don't need to. 30 is already very warm." He set it to 30 anyway. His room became a sauna. He opened all the windows and complained about wasting heat. The host said, "You did this to yourself." Another woman in Belgium checked the weather and saw it was going to be 18 degrees. She packed a winter coat. It was 18 Celsius. That's 64 Fahrenheit. She showed up in a huge puffy jacket while everyone else wore light sweaters. A local asked if she was okay. She said, "It's 18 degrees." The local said, "Yes, that's nice weather." She said, "Nice." The local explained Celsius. She took off the coat and carried it around all day. She was too embarrassed to admit the mistake. Now let's talk about distance. Americans use miles, feet, and inches. Europe uses kilometers, meters, and centimeters. This leads to some truly wild misunderstandings. I was giving directions to an American tourist in Munich. I said the train station was 2 kilometers away. He said, "So, like 20 minutes." I said, "More like 25 minutes walking." He looked confused. He said, 2 kilometers is less than 2 miles, right? I said, "Yes, it's about 1.2 miles. He said, "Then why does it take 25 minutes? I said, "Because 1.2 miles takes about 25 minutes to walk." He said, "That seems slow." I said, "That's normal walking speed." He insisted on checking Google Maps. Google agreed with me. He walked away mumbling about metric. A woman in Paris asked how far the Eiffel Tower was. Someone told her 300 meters. She said, "That's not far at all." She thought meters were like feet. 300 meters is almost 1,000 feet. She started walking. 15 minutes later, she asked someone else how much farther. They said 100 meters. She was furious. She said, "I've been walking forever, and I've only gone 200 meters?" The person explained meters are longer than feet. She said, "Why would you use a measurement that's longer?" The person said, "Why would you use one that's shorter?" My friend worked at a rental car place in Greece. An American guy asked how many miles per gallon the car got. My friend said, "We measure in liters per 100 kilometers." The guy said, "Can you convert that?" My friend said, "Roughly 35 miles per gallon." The guy said, "Why don't you just say that?" My friend said, "Because we don't use miles or gallons." The guy rented the car and called later, saying the distance signs were all wrong. My friend explained they're in kilometers. The guy said, "That should be mentioned somewhere." It was mentioned in the rental contract. He didn't read it. Someone in Portugal looked at a map and saw a town was 50 kilometers away. He thought that was really far. 50 kilometers is 31 miles. Not that far. He decided to drive. Halfway there, he checked his odometer. It said 25. He thought he'd only gone 25 miles. He called his friend saying the map was wrong. His friend explained the odometer shows kilometers. He said, "Why would a rental car use kilometers in Europe?" His friend said, "Because you're in Europe." A woman in Ireland asked a local how tall a building was. The local said 30 meters. She said, "Only 30 feet?" The local said, 30 meters. That's about 98 feet. She looked up. She said, "That's way taller than 30. The local said, "Because it's 30 meters, not 30 feet. She said, "This is too confusing." The local said, 1 meter is roughly 3 feet. Just multiply by 3. She walked away saying, "Math is hard." Another guy in the Netherlands tried to buy a bike. The shop owner asked what frame size he needed. He said, "I'm 6 feet tall." The owner looked blank. He said, "I need it in centimeters." The guy said, "Just give me a 6-foot bike." The owner said, "That's not how bikes work." The guy pulled out his phone to convert. He said, 183 centimeters. The owner showed him the right size. The guy said, "Why can't you just use feet?" The owner said, "Because I've never used feet in my life." I heard about a runner in Sweden who used a fitness app that tracked kilometers. She ran 5 kilometers and thought she'd run 5 miles. She posted about it online. People congratulated her. Then someone said, 5 kilometers is only 3.1 miles. She said, "What? I thought I ran 5 miles." They said, "Nope, 5 kilometers." She felt betrayed by her app. She changed it to miles and got confused because now her runs looked shorter. A guy in Italy asked how deep the pool was. The sign said 1.5 meters. He thought that meant 1.5 feet. He jumped in the deep end. It was almost 5 feet deep. He panicked for a second before realizing he could stand. He yelled at the lifeguard saying the sign was wrong. The lifeguard said, 1.5 meters is correct. The guy said, "That's 5 feet." The lifeguard said, "Yes." The guy said, "The sign should say 5 feet then." The lifeguard said, "The sign should say what it says, in meters, because we're in Italy." Another woman in Germany tried to order curtains online. The website asked for measurements in centimeters. She measured her window in inches and typed in those numbers. The curtains arrived. They were 3 times too long. She tried to return them. The company asked if she measured in centimeters. She said, "I measured in inches." They said, "We needed centimeters." She said, "I didn't know there was a difference." They said, "There's a very big difference." She had to pay return shipping. Someone in Denmark asked a contractor to build a fence 200 feet long. The contractor said, "Do you mean 200 meters?" The guy said, "No, feet." The contractor said, "That's only 60 meters. Are you sure?" The guy said yes. The fence got built. It was way shorter than the guy wanted. He complained. The contractor showed him the contract. It said 200 feet. The guy said, "I thought feet and meters were the same." The contractor said, "Not even close." The guy paid for an extension. A woman in Austria asked how far away the mountains were. A local said 10 kilometers. She said, "Oh, so 10 miles. The local said, "No, 10 kilometers. That's 6 miles, she said. "Close enough." She started walking. An hour later, she was exhausted. She asked someone how much farther. They said 4 kilometers. She sat down and called a taxi. She told her friends the mountains were false advertising. Let's talk about weight and volume, because this is where grocery shopping becomes a nightmare. Americans use pounds and ounces for weight, and gallons and cups for volume. Europe uses kilograms, grams, and liters. Nothing converts cleanly. I watched an American woman at a market in Lyon try to buy apples. The seller asked how many kilos she wanted. She said, "Just give me 5 pounds. He said, "I can give you 2 kilos. She said, "How much is that in pounds?" He said, "About 4.5 pounds. She said, "That's not 5 pounds. He said, "It's close." She said, "I need exactly 5. He sighed and gave her 2.3 kilos. She weighed them on her own scale later and complained they weren't exactly 5 pounds. She never went back. A guy in Spain tried to buy gas for his rental car. He wanted to fill the tank but didn't know how many liters that was. He knew his car held 15 gallons. He stood at the pump trying to calculate. He gave up and just filled it. The pump stopped at 57 liters. He panicked, thinking he overfilled. He Googled it. 15 gallons is 57 liters. He'd done it exactly right by accident. My friend worked at a bakery in Copenhagen. An American asked for a half pound of bread. My friend said, "We sell by the loaf or by grams." The American said, "I don't know grams, just half a pound." My friend said, "That's about 225 grams. She cut a piece. The American said, "That looks too small." My friend weighed it. It was exactly 225 grams. The American said, "Are you sure?" My friend said, "The scale doesn't lie." The American bought it, but didn't seem convinced. Someone in Belgium tried to follow an American recipe for cookies. The recipe called for 2 cups of flour. She didn't have measuring cups. She used a coffee mug. The cookies came out wrong. She asked an American friend what happened. The friend said, "A cup is 8 ounces. She said, "I used a mug." The friend said, "That's not the same." She said, "A cup is a cup." The friend explained cup is a specific measurement. She said, "That's ridiculous." She bought measuring cups and tried again. The cookies worked. A guy in Poland went to a gym and tried to lift weights. All the weights were in kilograms. He usually lifted 200 pounds. He didn't know the conversion. He grabbed what he thought was close. It was way too light. He tried heavier. Too heavy. He finally asked someone. They said 200 pounds is 90 kilograms. He found the right weight, but complained the whole time about having to do math. Another woman in Switzerland tried to buy milk. She wanted a gallon. The store only sold liters. She asked for 4 liters, thinking that was close to a gallon. 4 liters is more than a gallon. She got home and realized she bought too much. She called her friend, complaining. Her friend said, "A gallon is 3.8 liters. She said, "Why isn't it just 4? Her friend said, Because math doesn't care about convenience. I heard about a guy in Norway who tried to mail a package home. The post office asked how much it weighed. He said, "About 10 pounds." They said, "We need it in kilos." He said, "I don't have a kilo scale." They weighed it for him. 4.5 kilos. He said, "That's not 10 pounds." They said, "It's close." He argued for 5 minutes about the exact conversion. They finally charged him for 5 kilos. He paid and left, muttering about metric tyranny. A woman in Germany went to a hardware store and asked for a gallon of paint. The employee said, "We sell in liters." She said, "How many liters is a gallon?" He said, "About 3.8. She said, "Give me 4, then." He said, "That's more than a gallon." She said, "Close enough." She bought 4 liters and had leftover paint. She tried to return it. They said no returns on opened paint. She said, "I only opened it because you don't sell gallons." They didn't budge. Someone in France tried to buy cheese at a deli counter. She asked for 8 ounces. The worker said, "We use grams." She said, "How many grams is 8 ounces?" He said, "About 225. She said, "Just give me 8 ounces worth." He cut 225 grams. She said, "That looks small." He said, "That's 8 ounces. She bought it, but checked on her phone later. He was right. She felt silly. A guy in Italy tried to buy olive oil. The bottle said 1 liter. He thought that was less than a quart. 1 liter is slightly more than a quart. He bought 3 bottles thinking he needed that much. He got home and realized he bought way too much. His roommate said, "Why did you buy 3 liters?" He said, "I thought I needed 3 quarts. His roommate said, "Quarts and liters aren't the same." He used olive oil for every meal for 2 months. Another woman in Austria asked a butcher for 2 pounds of beef. The butcher said, "We sell in kilograms." She said, "Fine, 1 kilogram." He said, "That's 2.2 pounds. She said, "Perfect." He cut it. She looked at it and said, "That's bigger than 2 pounds." He said, "Because it's 2.2 pounds. She said, "I said 1 kilogram. He said, "That's what 1 kilogram is." She bought it, but left confused. A guy in Sweden tried to buy fabric. He needed 3 yards. The store sold by the meter. He asked for 3 meters. 3 meters is more than 3 yards. He bought it. When he got home, he had too much fabric. He looked up the conversion. 1 yard is 0.9 meters. He needed 2.7 meters. He went back to return some. The store said no returns on cut fabric. He made extra pillows with the leftover material. I want to end with my all-time favorite metric story. A guy in Finland rented a cabin in the woods. The host left instructions saying the lake was 500 meters away. The guy thought that meant 500 feet. He told his family it was super close. They walked for almost 10 minutes before reaching the lake. His kids complained the whole way. His wife said, "I thought you said it was 500 feet. He checked the instructions again. 500 meters. He Googled the conversion. 1,640 feet. His wife said, "You didn't convert?" He said, "I forgot we were in Finland." She said, "How do you forget you're in a different country?" He had no answer. The kids called him Metric Dad for the rest of the trip. That story sums it all up perfectly. Americans forget they're in a different system. They assume everything works like it does at home. They don't convert. They don't check. They just guess and hope for the best. And then they're shocked when the numbers don't match. Here's the thing. Metric isn't hard. It's actually easier than Imperial because everything is base 10. 1,000 meters in a kilometer. 1,000 grams in a kilogram. 100 centimeters in a meter. No weird conversions like 12 inches in a foot or 16 ounces in a pound. It's logical. But Americans grow up with Imperial. It's in our bones. We know what 70 degrees feels like. We know how far a mile is. We know what a pound of butter looks like. Switching to metric requires actual effort. You have to learn new reference points. You have to practice conversions. You have to accept that your system isn't universal. And most people don't want to do that. They want the world to adapt to them. They want signs in miles, thermostats in Fahrenheit, and deli counters that understand pounds. But that's not happening. The rest of the world uses metric. When you travel, you're the guest. You adapt, so next time you're abroad, download a conversion app. Learn the basics. Memorize a few key numbers. 0 Celsius is freezing. 25 Celsius is room temperature. A kilometer is 0.6 miles. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. A liter is a bit more than a quart. That's enough to survive or don't learn. Keep converting in your head wrong. Keep arguing with locals about measurements. Keep leaving reviews saying the thermostats are broken and the maps are confusing. Just know that everyone else is laughing at you. I've seen this play out hundreds of times. The Americans who adapt have great trips. The Americans who fight metric have terrible trips. It's that simple. The measurements aren't the problem. The refusal to learn is, and trust me, these stories keep coming. Every day someone new arrives expecting inches and gets centimeters instead. The cycle never ends. I'll be here watching, taking notes, converting their complaints